Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode we have Netflix 183rd film from 2019. It's the biographical comedy Dolemite Is My Name, directed by Craig Brewer. It stars Eddie Murphy, Joy Randolph, Keegan-Michael Key, Mike Epps, Craig Robinson, Titus Burgess, and Wesley Snipes. I'm Jesse, and I am here with MJ. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, mate. Welcome. I don't know how to respond to welcome. Welcome. Thank you. Hello. It's good to be here. I am excited to talk about Dolemite Is My Name. I'm excited to talk about movies with you, as we do every week. How have you been, mate?
Yeah, good. I've been looking forward to this film since it came out, I reckon. And I think I don't want to repeat us every week, but this is one of the ones where I'm like, yeah, we'll do it on the podcast. We'll get to it. 3 years later, we're there.
You've done so well to hold off. Because when this came out, I was like, I can watch it now because it's going to be years until we watch it on the podcast. And then when I watch it again, I won't remember it. But nowadays, I notice you've changed your tact. If a new Netflix movie comes out that you want to see, you just watch it and you jump on a solo pod and talk about it.
Yep. Well, there's
honestly, anything that comes out now, we'll be doing honestly in like 5 years. So maybe more.
Exactly. Who knows if we'll still be in 500 episodes in? Who knows?
Yeah, that's probably where they're at right now, isn't it? Like probably 500-600 movies. Gosh.
But you have, so obviously you just said you've seen this one before. So did you remember a lot of it, or?
Generally, I think if you've seen the film, and like we'll do a quick spoiler alert now. If you haven't seen it, we are going to spoil the film at some point. But it's not the sort of film that's full of big moments that you do remember, if you know what I mean. Like it's like I didn't forget anything, but there was nothing really major that I was like, oh, that was a big plot twist I forgot about. So I generally remembered the basis of it and the bits and pieces where I was like, I can't exactly remember what's going to happen now, but it's just one of those films. I think it's more of a sit back and enjoy as opposed to really dissect, which we're about to do.
Good. Well, we do start off with our fast flicks where we do a quick summary about what the film is all about. So what is Dolemite Is My Name? It's too many is's. What in Dolemite Is My Name? Give us your wrap.
I got a very bad fast fix this week. I've gone really boring and I just wrote it and went with it and didn't change it. So this is the story of Rudy Ray Moore and his rise to fame in black pop culture in the 1970s. It's boring.
That's okay. Mine's pretty boring too. It's based on a true story, follows Rudy in the build up to the production of his blaxploitation film Dolemite.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'd always talk about this being the elevator pitch. If someone said to me that, like, oh, this is the story of Rudy Ray Moore, I'd be like, I don't know what that is, and I don't need to see that film. I guess the pitch. If you're pitching this film in any way, you're talking about Eddie Murphy. So it's
very true. He's the big part in this film. So before we do talk about some performances in this one, what could you work out about the development of this one and how it ended up on Netflix?
Yeah, so it's June 7, 2018. That was when it was first announced. That's when we first sort of learned that Dolemite Is My Name was going to be a movie. It got announced then that Craig Brewer was going to direct it. There was a script written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, and Netflix already on board producing and distributing the film with Eddie Murphy to star as Rudy Ray Moore. So Eddie Murphy basically has come out and said recently, or since the film been made, that a biopic of Rudy Ray Moore had long been a dream project for him. So he initially met with the two screenwriters back in 2003. Can you believe it? 2003. And they began developing the project, nearly 20 years ago. So Eddie Murphy at the time arranged a meeting between the writers with Rudy Ray Moore. And he told them, many of his life stories because he passed away in 2008. However, after all this, it just became really difficult to make this film. And, we don't necessarily know the ins and outs of Hollywood, but you hear a lot of stuff where things just get stuck in production hell and they just can't get movies made. It's not a cheap thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do. And this is one of those situations where it just didn't happen. So 10 years later, it finally comes onto the scene, and Eddie Murphy's aged 10 years. I think he's, at the time that they made at the time that the original Dolemite movie was made, I think Eddie Murphy was like 10 years older than what Rudy Ray Moore actually was when he made it. So might have been interesting if they had made it in 2008. But anyway, principal photography began on June 12, 2018. Dolemite Is My Name then had its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival nearly a year later. Over a year later, on September 7, 2019. It was released then in theatres, from a limited release in theatres on October 4, and then it became available worldwide on Netflix on the 25th of October 2019. So that's the story of it. I did want to just bring up one little thing I just found on the IMDb trivia page. Some of that stuff's normally crap, but I did like the idea that Keegan-Michael Key, who's in the cast of this film, was a huge fan of Rudy Ray Moore before getting the gig in this film, which I can totally see that. I can see how Keegan-Michael Key would like this kind of content. But while he was working on Predator in 2018, the other cast members would actually come to Keegan-Michael Key's trailer to watch Rudy Ray Moore films. So I love that. That just gives you an insight into Keegan-Michael Key, which doesn't surprise me one bit, and I really enjoyed it.
It's a good story. Yeah, I think there's not too much else to add really, apart from it is a true story. So there's lots of little facts and tidbits about the references made in this film throughout to the life of Rudy. And I think if you think about the post credits, they include shots from the films that were referenced in this. And I think overall the overall gist is that, well, it's the making of the film Dolemite. A lot of the scenes and comedic elements are probably from a few of the films that they all made together, rather than just this one, sort of paying homage to the collection of films that they created. And it was nice too at the end of the film that it was dedicated to Eddie Murphy's brother Charlie, who'd passed away. So that was a nice little touch to finish off with as well, and added to a bit of the heart of this one. And awards, as we probably alluded to at the start, this was sort of earmarked as a contender for awards back in 2019, and it was 97 nominations altogether. It got for mainly Murphy's acting performance, and it won 30 awards. So out of 97 awards, it won 37. So sorry, 97 awards, it won 30. That's a pretty big film, really, for an amount of awards for a Netflix film.
That's it. And I remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the Laundromat. When this movie first came out, all the talk was, will Eddie Murphy get a nomination for Best Actor at the Academy Awards and relevant awards? And he didn't get an Oscar nom, but he did obviously receive and win a lot of other awards. And he was great in it.
Yeah. The translations for the title across the world, the only one that was sort of a little bit different in Japan, it was just titled Rudy Ray Moore, which I thought was a nice title as well. Just tells you that it's his story, so that wasn't too bad either.
Well, I don't know anything about Rudy Ray Moore going into this film, right? Did you? Do you know Rudy Ray Moore?
No, nothing at all.
So when I'm first watching this film, I remember this when I first watched it. This is Eddie Murphy. He's talking about Rudy Ray Moore. I'm Rudy Ray Moore. And I'm like, he's going to change his name to Dolemite or something. I'm like, and then I'd never realized that Dolemite was just a character that he played. Yeah. It was a little bit more low key than I expected it to be.
True. Well, did you see the tagline for this one?
I didn't. No.
Ties in very nicely with what you've just said, because the tagline is "Make your own legend." So that's ties in with the idea of Dolemite is his own legend, I guess.
I don't mind that tagline.
Yeah, not bad. I had a percentage match for this one.
Not me. What'd you get?
I had 77%, so not too bad. Not too bad. It's
not bad for you. You get some low ones.
I do. It's not in the 80s though. That's where if you're 80 and above, then you're pretty much telling me I'm going to enjoy it. So in the 70s,
that's true. I often get some real big 99s and 95s and 96, and I'm like, Netflix, you're really putting yourself out on a limb here, because if you get this wrong, I don't trust you again.
And they have so much data on you, I'm sure that's right. Let's have a look at the consensus. Fill us in on what the critics and the audiences have said about this one.
Yeah, I don't think you can really look at this in any other way than this movie being a real hit for Netflix. This is one that they got right. It landed. So it's a 7.3 out of 10 on IMDb off the back of 60,000 ratings, which is great. And it's a very similar score on Letterboxd, 3.6 out of 5. that's off nearly 83,000 ratings. So these are big numbers of people who watched it and liked it. And we saw the awards noms. I think Netflix is patting themselves on the back for this.
Yeah, even Rotten Tomatoes agrees here as well. The critics, there were 234 critics, which is extremely high. It sits at 97%, so that is certified
Wow.
fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And the audience is just as kind, 91% on more than 100 ratings from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes as well. So overall,
That's
this is a hit, as you said.
Well done, Netflix.
Yeah, well, is it a hit in your eyes? What are your early thoughts?
Yeah, this as we've talked about, this is a rewatch for me. It wasn't as good on a rewatch, I have to be honest. I think it felt longer than I remember it. It really did drag this time around. Considering it's a 2-hour movie, there is a lot of the same stuff that just kind of happens, and a lot of the same tone, a lot of the same humor. But Eddie Murphy is just so much fun in this movie. The energy that he brings, the humor that he brings, he really does carry this film. And this is a good film. I probably didn't enjoy the rewatch as much. And you know what? I wasn't necessarily looking forward to rewatching it either. Like, I enjoyed it when I first watched it, but I didn't need to see it again. And I guess that probably came out a little bit. But I think it's a good film.
Cool. Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. I think anything that sort of covers the making of movies and the movie industry is going to get my attention. And as we've sort of touched on, Eddie Murphy was made for this role. It was so good. And I also enjoyed the commentary on the struggles that are faced by Black creatives as well. So yeah, for me, it's a big tick.
Yeah, I actually, and we'll probably get into it, I kind of wish they had gone a little bit harder on those things. They kind of really touch the surface on a lot of that kind of stuff without really going into it. It's almost mentioned but not explored, if you get my drift.
Yeah, and we'll probably talk. Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later, because I think that it was done in quite a good way as well, even though it wasn't done over the top. So anyway, let's talk about some characters. Start off with Rudy.
Oh, really? You want to start with him? Okay.
No, sure.
Of course I do.
Okay, Nick.
Rudy Redmore. Look, look, Rudy. I love, like, he's not like an automatically I love this character kind of guy, but I don't know why he's not. Because like, I love his drive and his ambition, and particularly off the back of so much failure. Like, at what point do you just give up? He basically just dives headfirst on any idea that he has, and it's hard not to admire that, because he's got this non-stop desire to be famous. And I don't necessarily think he wants to change the world with his art in inverted commas, I guess, but he literally just wants to be famous, and he works his ass off to do so, and he puts everything on the line to keep feeding this ambition. And at his core, he's just, more than anything, he's just a really good friend. He's there for people. He doesn't care about people's backstory. He doesn't care about who they are, how they got to, but he just goes into bat for you. And that's more of his legacy than his, as I said, like, his art that he's creating. He doesn't care about that as much as he just cares about getting his friends on board, but also just that desire to be famous. And obviously, by the end of it, he's just this really infectious character. Eddie Murphy, as we've already spoken about, just smashes this performance out of the park. So it's the movie is him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. I think the idea that he's playing a character then creates a character, so he's playing another or multiple other characters that we see throughout. It's like, the idea that he's stand up, and then you've got his LPs, and he's not feeling fulfilled in the singing or the rapping or the stand up or working at the record store, and the idea that this idea of movies is my next big thing. It's like he's happy to take on any challenge, and I really liked the way that they made little subtle comments about the rough childhood, and the dad, sort of not being the best father. And I think that, especially in that scene where he does that, he has that photo of his dad, and he uses that for inspiration in his acting. I liked that they didn't blatantly just be like, my issues or my inability to succeed are because of my upbringing. It was like, no, this guy's got drive, he's driven, and he's going to do whatever he can, and he'll use those things from the past to motivate him without it being such a big deal. I just thought that was cool with his character.
Yeah, it ties into him being knocked back for everything that he's ever done. that he's still got that ability to bounce back, which in a sense is what he would have learned from his childhood, instead of accepting that as like, this is my life, this is what happens to me, things don't work for me. He's like, well, I'm used to not getting what I want, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Now there's a cast of characters that sort of surround him throughout this film. They're all little tiny bits. Well, I would suggest, I'll probably think we talk about Lady Reed next, because I think her character's the next one that we sort of is the heart of this film.
Yeah, I think you struggle to get too much out of any other character than Lady Reed, and obviously Rudy. I suppose she's kind of the true embodiment of Rudy's infectious personality and his ability to deliver for his friends. I think maybe he's got an eye for talent because he picked her up out of the blue, which I'm not really buying from the scene that we did. In real life, maybe he did. But I think the point of introducing this character was to ensure we understand the impact that he had on those around him. I don't think we get a proper taste of Lady Reed's story, and I'd actually be keen to explore more of it, because the snippets we see of her talking about her stage fright and her battles with image and juggling life of being a mum, they're really just things that she mentions, and from an audience perspective, we kind of we're glossed over it because we don't actually see her dealing with it. She just kind of says, "Hey, I've got an issue with stage fright." Next scene, she's singing, "Hey, I'm really worried about being on camera tomorrow because you don't see girls my size and the camera adds 10 pounds," or whatever it is. Next scene, she's just in the movie. Like, you don't actually see how she deals with it. She mentions it. So I think there's a bit left on the plate with Lady Reed, but still a really good character, and again used to show a side of Rudy that we may not have seen otherwise, which seems to be an important part of who he was.
Yeah, I don't have too much further to add, because I think the first meeting between her and Rudy at the bar, with that lacking of confidence, and I just really appreciated the way, and it sort of developed Rudy's character more, in that he just had this ability to make her feel safe and people feel safe, and we didn't necessarily need to see her dealing with these struggles that she's got. And if you do that quick cut, we know that Rudy's dealt with this. Rudy's been able to make her shine. So it sort of adds further to his ability to get the team working around him. And I did like the follow up towards the end too, where she sort of thanks Rudy for recognizing that she's a real woman, because by the end of it, we've seen her, even though we haven't seen everything in between, we have seen her develop and shine, and she's happy in herself and happy where she's at, which was a nice thing.
Oh yeah, she's come a long way from how she starts, getting basically dumped.
Yeah,
but like dumping, and I guess ending a big phase of her life, getting hitting back. Appropriate this week with the Oscars being on the slap.
Well, I was going to mention that we had Chris Rock in his film as well, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
When Chris Rock came on the screen, I was like,
it was already weird, wasn't it? I can't believe it's already.
Are there any other characters that you wanted to touch on?
And I've just got a tiny thing to talk about, Jerry Jones, played by Keegan-Michael Key. I just thought it was interesting that they included, not that they included, this is obviously based on what really happened, but to see that there's a guy, obviously still a black guy, but from a more upper class part of society, who could still really buy into what Rudy is doing and Rudy is offering, and that energy that he brings. Like, he seemed to be a very accomplished playwright and director in his own regard. And Rudy's like, let's make a movie let's make a film for the big screen. And he's just like, you know what? If you think we can do that, then I'm all on board. And he bought into that. And that's I guess that's kind of the far-reaching side of things that Rudy had. And I guess it ties into the film school kids who came and helped out. Not no one, but Rudy didn't care what color skin they had. If they were happy to help and be part of it, then he was going to give them as much as he could. And it was kind of nice to see.
And I think having that Jerry character, almost like the complete opposite of Wesley Snipes' Dervell Martin, the director, like the only real professional that was sort of on the set, and provides a lot of comedic moments in this, because of that idea of there is someone who's a professional and doesn't agree with what's going on and doesn't think what's happening is going to work. It was really good to have that sort of parallel between, or the differences between those that fully supported him. You just needed someone to say, hey, there were people there that sort of said, hey, this probably isn't going to work.
Yeah, that's very true as well. And the idea that Rudy Ray Moore was just basically like, yeah, we don't know what we're doing here. We're just trying to make a movie. You guys can do the technical stuff. We're like, he was fully admitted that, like, that some of the scenes they're shooting, I'm like, I don't know how you're doing all this. They stole power from next door. Like,
It was good. All right, the director Craig Brewer. Anything interesting about Craig?
look, I don't know the name Craig Brewer, but why am I having trouble saying Brewer? I think I keep wanting to say Brewer. I don't know. Anyway, Brewer. Writer and director of Hustle and Flow in 2005, where Terrence Howard was nominated for Best Actor. He did a Footloose remake in 2011. Director and producer on Empire TV show, but that wasn't after. Writer for Legend of Tarzan. So he's sort of been around. This was actually the first film not to be written by him that he's directed, as well as the first film that's produced by Netflix. But after Dolemite, he did Coming to America, as in Coming the number 2 America, the sequel.
Reunited with Eddie Murphy. Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, he's done a bit.
Yeah, it's I haven't got anything else to add. I think Empire did. I think he directed 10 episodes on that as well. So a very popular TV show there for a while. Good. This is a chance to talk about some scenes. What are some scenes in this one that you enjoyed?
Yeah, I liked a few. It was one of those movies where I was a little bit surprised how many I did like, but I actually really like the opening with Snoop when he's in there trying to pitch his songs to be played. And I think the main reason was, as I said, I wasn't really looking forward to this rewatch because I'm like, I've done this before, but Eddie Murphy is so infectious and brings that energy from the very start that it's impossible not to come on board straight away. And that was great. It was a funny scene. And I actually love the fact that he plays that song later on when he's like, "Can you play my record now?"
Exactly. That's the first thing I've got is that the two scenes that you've got with Snoop, like they're purposeful. You've got the one that's set up. It's like, cool, Snoop Dogg's on screen, and then the refusing to play his song and locking the door and playing the one that he doesn't like. That was just a really good follow-up. Just a perfect use of almost a cameo. It was good.
I think I read that Snoop did work with the real Rudy Ray Moore in a movie or a TV show or something back in the 90s. So
yeah.
He would have enjoyed being part of this film for that reason, I imagine.
Very true.
The next scene was purely a humor scene for me when Rudy and Jerry were brainstorming ideas for the movie and kind of coming up with a script. And Rudy just keeps mentioning, I'm going to keep doing it. Rudy keeps mentioning all the things he wants to. We've got to have kung fu, like, and then he's like, and we'll have an exorcism. And Jerry just kind of was like, what? Like, just like draws a line on it. And then even just the way Eddie Murphy's just like, your mother sucks cocks in hell. Just the reason that he doesn't want to do it is, too much, you clean up all that green stuff. But apparently that they did a movie that had an exorcism in it as one of their sort of 5 movies that they all did. And that was kind of like a reference to that. I just thought that was a really funny scene.
I thought as well, like the idea of like the all-girl kung fu fighting army, and then we see them like practicing later on. Like, it was funny. It was very, very funny. I completely agree.
Probably the next. This is probably the main. I think this sums up Rudy. This scene sums up Rudy the best is when he tells Derville that basically that he's not bigger than the movie, and how he's like, if people down there get hungry, I'll make them sandwiches. And he's like, no one here has an ego. We're all doing this because we have a greater vision of creating a film that no one thinks that we can actually make. And I really like that he doesn't come off as the smartest guy, but he's self-conscious enough to understand that, no, I'm doing everything for the right reasons, and I'm not going to let you push me around or be a dick about it just because you think you know who you are. And he really puts him back in his place, and there's no argument off the back of that. And I really liked that scene. It showed the side of Rudy that I guess we were seeing without seeing it, and maybe it's too explicit, but I thought it was great.
Nice.
And the final scene was just a little shot that I really enjoyed when he had that film screening. I think it was in Indiana, when he was basically spruiking it himself and paying for the midnight screening. And seeing him walking down the aisle and look back at the projector, that vision that he had initially seen the projector and thought, if I can do this, I can reach the whole world. And that moment of realization was really nice and really well done.
I've also got that too, that just the first scene where he stares at the projector, and then it's almost like, he can see his dreams light up, and then that, like you mentioned, that following shot at the end, it was just a nice bringing back together too. Yeah,
I love that ambition, right? Like the amount of people that probably think that for a split second and then do nothing about it. This guy goes out and does it.
Excellent. I think I haven't got to like. Yeah, we had a lot of matching scenes there, like three. Which
We're
was
rarely aligned with
yeah.
scenes.
Oh, exactly. So I think there's a scene where Rudy goes begging his auntie for money and sort of like pulls the butter knife on her. I just thought that, I was like, this guy's desperate. So I
Give me the
thought that
money.
was funny. Yeah, that was funny. And sort of to do with the cinema scenes as well. The one where the group of them go and sit with that in that cinema that's like packed with whites, and the whole audience is just killing themselves laughing. I just thought that was a really good way to show the parallels between the comedy that he's doing in the clubs and the producers and the labels and all those people saying, this is a market that goes around 5 blocks in every city in America, rather than, and then you have that same reflection that comedy, art, there are different target audiences, there are different people that get different things, and obviously there is an audience for different people and different lifestyles too, and different backgrounds, all that sort of stuff. So I just really thought that was a really cool setup to sort of,
and that's what he was, right?
yeah.
He was letting people know that there is an audience out there for this that was getting completely ignored.
Exactly. So yeah, that ties in obviously with some themes we're probably going to talk about later. Last thing, there was a scene. The film's done and he's still at that hotel that he's kicked all the junkies out, and the phone rings and he takes that call about like a studio sort of rejecting the film. And it was just a really cool setup with him sort of isolated in that booth, and you could just feel how on his own he was at that stage, that everyone's sort of gone, the project's done, and he's got nowhere to go. He's down and out, and there's nothing else that he can do. He feels that almost failure for this at this moment. I think it sort of follows in with that scene in the diner where he sort of loses it. And it's the one sort of scene that we actually see him take it out on his friend. So it was a nice little turning point, I guess.
He literally had everything on the line.
Yeah. The last thing that this film uses montages an awful lot. I don't think I've seen a film in a long time that has so many montages of little things throughout, like the printing of the LPs. You've got him doing the promotion for his film. There's just lots of these little montages, and usually not a big fan, but I think they use these really well throughout. So that's just the last thing I'll put in there.
Montages would be one of those things that you don't really understand how much time it would take to shoot that. Because even though you're seeing a second or half a second or something, they're not shooting for half a second. They got to set everything up, and they got to do it for like the smallest amount of screen time. It would be painstaking at times.
Exactly. Is there anything in this one you didn't like?
I didn't like Wesley Snipes. That character didn't work for me at all, and I couldn't take him seriously. I think the initial meeting of Derville is took me too long to understand what this character is and who he is. And then when you finally understand it, you're probably halfway through spending time with him on screen. And I just don't think it worked. I don't know whether it was a Wesley Snipes, playing outside of the Wesley Snipes that we know, but it just didn't work for me, and I couldn't take him seriously at any point. So that's probably more on me. But and for me, the other thing I struggled with is the making of the movie. I thought really dragged on. I just had a little bit of it got to a point where I had no idea of the direction that they were going with this film and what they were trying to do and how it was supposed to look. And it just felt like it was just scene after scene after scene of them making the movie. And I kind of didn't see an end game to it. And it was slow. So that's the two things for me I struggled with.
Cool. I haven't got anything. There's nothing that really bugged me. So
that's good.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's move into some themes and some ideas. What are you taking away from this one?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at this, and it might be better for you to talk about the race side of things because I feel like you've got some more ideas than I do. But then you've got the person, this character, regardless of who he is, with that ambition and that drive and that desire and that ability to continue to back up and just keep fighting for what you want to do. And if it doesn't work, that's cool. Dust yourself off and have another go. Like, it's a pretty good character to base a film around, and obviously the friendship side of things too. You get the idea that his mates have always been there for him as well. Like, they, as much as he sort of does things for them, like, they're the ones that helped him get off the ground, and it's just a full circle of what friendship can do. So I really like that side of things, but I am really keen to hear your thoughts on the race side of things too, because we're talking about a film from era of the 1970s, so it's potentially a big era of change for racism.
Yeah, exactly. I think you summed that up really well. Like I just had like single words for you got perseverance, chasing dreams, standing up against those who say no, doubters, all that sort of stuff, which you summed up really nicely. But yeah, I think the idea that and this is based in the 70s, so even prior to the 70s, the whiteness of Hollywood that we still sort of see today, realistically, that and the difficulties for black artists to have a voice, and no matter how talented, no matter how persistent they were, there were always these challenges. The inability to fund, the inability to get the film out there without having to pay to put the film in a cinema yourself. These are all things that, and I have a little bit of knowledge about blaxploitation because I use it a little bit when I talk about Night of the Living Dead. When I teach that film, as like you've got a strong male protagonist in a film through the 60s, which wasn't something that you'd see, and the only time you would see it is through these creative black people that made these films for their audiences, and quite successful and looked back on quite positively, because it's perfect to see this representation of real life characters, real life people on the screen. Even though Dolemite's character was probably a little bit over the top with his kung fu and his shooting and car chases and things like that.
That's the idea of blaxploitation, though, is that then they leaned into it and said, "Well, if you want us to do this, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it the way we want to do it," and that's what's cool about it.
Exactly, do it our way. So yeah, I really like that undertone throughout, and the idea that the pioneers, these guys were pioneers in their creative fields, and that probably leads me in. I did see on the online Forbes. Most people know Forbes is like a publication. So Forbes put together like a list of the best lessons to take away from this film. And I thought it was a cool little list that you could come up with. So they said, so number one, just because you've got nothing doesn't mean you can't create something. Cool, that's good. Number two, pioneers must be fearless, and I think we saw that through Dolemite. He's completely fearless. Number three, real world experiences enhance creativity. This is where he got his stories from. He spoke with homeless people. So that was perfect. Lesson number four was listen to everyone and ignore most of, in brackets, what you hear. So if you take that feedback,
listen,
if you've got your goal, you've got your desire, you follow through with that. Number five was you are the expert. So if it's your project, you are the expert on that issue. You're the expert on that story because it's your story.
Such a hard thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah. And then finally, number six was be different and never give up. And we definitely saw that in this film.
It's very heartwarming, Forbes. Well done.
I thought that was a great list.
I like the idea about what you know, and that obviously comes through in that scene we both liked with writing the story. I was like, people like to write things about what they do, and he's just like, you don't know, like my life, nothing's exciting's happened to me. And then he breaks it down and he's like, there's enough there. Like, story. You might not think it's exciting, but it's there. So,
and if it's your story, you're not going to lose the passion for it. You're not going to get bored with it, especially if you're making a film, you're spending long time, years even, putting these things together.
Oh, so, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's nice. I like that.
All right. Well, what did you take away from this film?
You know what? I didn't think this the first time I watched it, but it had for obvious reasons, it had a real disaster artist feel to it. But weirdly enough, I feel like when I watched the disaster artist, I knew a lot more. I felt like I knew more was going on when they were actually filming The Room as I did during Dolemite, which is crazy because The Room is a nonsensical movie in many aspects. But I got to a point watching where going through the filming of the Dolemite movie where I got a little bit lost. But anyway, it's got a real disaster artist feel to it, which is similar to what you say. It's a movie about making movies. Yeah. And the one thing I don't know if this is more of a thought or a takeaway, but I don't know if we truly get a sense of his rise. Like I feel like there's so much they do well in this story, but I feel like he goes from zero to hero really quickly, and we didn't get a sense. And maybe that's how it was. I don't feel like they captured it as well as they could have. Like this guy achieved so much, and I feel like we missed it a little bit. It was all of a sudden he was just famous and he was just making a movie, and I don't know. Something feels like it's missing, and I'll get to this in questions as well because I do have a question for you about it.
Cool. Yeah, for me, I think I appreciated that in a lot of films you have like your development stage. There's going to be a moment where your character's like down and out, where the character, reflects and has this huge chunk of time spent with them, looking back on choices they've made, decisions they've made, trying to right the wrongs and, come out successful on the other side. And I think that this film was mostly done really positively. Like, yes, there's barriers. Yes, there's painful barriers as well, but like they're addressed and just really moves on quickly. So I really like that they didn't follow that common structure of you got to fall to bounce back up. Whereas it was just like let's go through this film and let's follow his story, but do it in a positive way.
That's a great point. Every now and then you get the movie where you're like, I don't really want to have the down here. I don't know it's going to come. I don't need the down. And you're right. This film never really has it in a big way. The only bad thing that happens is he needs more money, and it doesn't take him long to get it. And he's got to put you got to put everything on the line. Like basically, like you're going to be indebted to us forever. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. And you just feel like that's going to be okay. So it's a good point. And sometimes it's nice to watch that.
Yeah, and there's always those short little good follow-ups of like, oh, he paid us back. Oh, he's paid it back. Oh, yeah, guess who paid it? Like, it was just like quick, done, follow. It's all, nicely done. So, yeah, good. Did you go on IMDb at all to look anyone up?
You're gonna love this one, Jesse. This is a great IMDb. I didn't jump onto after the film, to be honest, because I'm talking about Rico, who is the bum who did all the jokes at the start, and I'm like, I recognize that guy. I'm like, he's obviously like dressed to look like a homeless guy, but I reckon he's definitely someone. And it was like clear in my head that he was someone. So I jumped on afterwards. Actor's name is Ron Cephas Jones. He is in The Holiday Calendar, which we did on this podcast, and he plays Gramps.
Santa?
Gramps. He's like the old wise grandpa.
Yeah.
And like, I must admit, when I clicked on his photo, I'm like, it's The Holiday Calendar. And I knew it before I even like flicked down, and I found Holiday Calendar 2018, and it was so satisfying.
That is
he was a good character
good
in that.
Yeah, I know you really liked that character.
It was all right. It was for what it was. It was okay.
Good. No, that's to always get one from a film that we've done. You can't complain about that.
It is nice.
All right, I didn't have one. So question time. Yeah, had a question for me. I'm interested.
Why can't I start to get into it? Because the question I have is how much time actually transpires in this film? Because one day you feel like he's trying to get his record played at the very start. The next day he's stealing and polishing these jokes. Then he performs them, then he records them, and then all of a sudden he's got a record contract and he's on tour. But you have to assume a bunch of times passed to that, and then he must have been on tour for a while before he gets the idea to make the film. I'm assuming this is all over the matter of years, but it didn't feel like that.
Okay.
Did you get that vibe that it didn't feel like years had passed?
I guess the way that it was all done so fast moving that they didn't use any title cards to say 2 years later or anything like that, which is fine.
He didn't need to either.
Didn't need to, yeah. Yeah, it's obviously.
It just felt like he went on tour. He'd like just got his record deal, so he went on tour, and I get that. That's kind of normal. And it's like, hey, come home. You're really famous. So he comes home and says to the boys, hey, let's go see a movie. They go see a movie. He's like, I'm going to make a movie. And it just feels like it was so seamless. So I think that's probably why I said I missed the rise. I feel like he didn't get the rise. It just kind of happened via phone call. He's like, hey, you're in the charts. Oh, that's it.
That's probably where the montages didn't work then, because they had the montages of the record label. They had him on tour through the montages. So, that montage would have been months of him going into each city doing shows and stuff. So, yeah, that's a good point. The question I've got a couple. The one, so Rudy stole that character, Dolemite, from the homeless guy that you looked up. And he cleared a whole bunch of junkies out of an abandoned hotel. Just cleared them out. Should the audience feel let down that we're seeing this character that we want to see do well, and he's done some pretty ordinary things?
Good point. I mean, it's such a specific character for a homeless guy to create. That is there a reference anywhere else, or did he just literally create that from scratch? And then Rudy's like, "Oh yeah, this is great."
True.
But then clearing them out, it would have been nicer if there was a nicer way to clear them out. Maybe he got them somewhere else to go. But yeah, it's a good point, Jesse.
Yeah. And this is where I think they do a really good parallel. His stand-up jokes and songs. Did you find any of them funny?
Not necessarily. No. But there's an energy that he brings to it with the language. If I'm out at a club and I'm hearing him say this kind of stuff, or out at whatever those things are, I'm hearing him saying this song, I think I would get sucked into that energy. I think I would find it a bit more funny. But then again, like, we're also not that audience. This is an audience who's never heard this kind of stuff talked about. They're like, this is our vibe. Someone gets us. So I guess that's, if we had found it funny, maybe it wouldn't have worked as well.
Yeah, and that's why I think he's referred to as the godfather of rap, because realistically, this is rap, and you put a beat on that, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be funny. It's more musical. So yeah, I thought it was just an interesting sort of thing, especially with that scene in the cinema where they're all the whole crowd are laughing at what's on the screen, and they're not getting it. It's just like a parallel, I guess, that whether it's the modern day audience, whether it's culturally different, whatever it is, it was just, for me, stood out as a very interesting parallel.
I did read that about him being almost like the undisputed godfather of rap. Like, I feel like it's not a gray area. I feel like he is just like, he's the guy that started this stuff, and that's huge.
Yeah, and that's why you get a motion picture made after you. Yes.
Yeah, I guess so. There's motion pictures made up of people less than that. If you like, rap music's enormous right now. If someone said this is a guy who started rap music, I reckon it's going to sell more tickets than it is going to be, hey, this is a guy who did a few blaxploitation films in the 70s. Yeah, exactly. Anyway.
Good. All right. Well, I think we're almost ready to put it all together and come up with a final rating out of 5. What are your final thoughts?
I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, to be honest. I do feel a bit bad that I'm giving this film a slight hit from my initial watch. I think it's fun. I think it's funny enough, and I think Eddie Murphy incredibly steals the show. But it does drag a little bit, and it does meander into a little bit of a meaninglessness from time to time. I kind of wondered whether there was more than just a fun retelling of a cult figure. And that's kind of what this movie is. I know there's a lot more to it, but with all that said, it's still enjoyable, and it's still a really good, feel-good movie. So I'm bringing it down to 3 stars. My initial watch, I gave it 3.5. It's come down to a 3, which feels a bit unfair, but it also feels right. If I could give it a 3.25, I would, but you can't get that granular.
It's fine. It's fine. My result might bump it up and make you feel better about it. So
this is what we do so well.
I enjoyed this, and I think it's well worth a watch for a feel good movie. If you need a feel good movie, this is one I can recommend. And I think, even though it wasn't laugh out loud funny for me, I literally smiled this whole movie. I think, like, it was just like seeing Eddie Murphy on the screen playing that role, and just the situations and the determination from him as a character. I really enjoyed it. So I'm giving it a 4. So that'll give us a 3.5 average, which will bring it back to what you originally had, and then we're all good.
All right. Well, nicely done. We do that well. I think you even me out a lot when I'm unsure of my score. So like that. No, it's funny you say laugh out loud though. I feel like I haven't seen a laugh out loud movie in a long time. I'd like to watch a laugh out loud movie again.
Yeah, I think so too. I think laugh out loud
purely joy. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. I think Netflix have got the last week they've released a new one with a whole bunch of comedians, haven't they? From what's his name? The guy that did Knocked Up and stuff.
Yep. Judd Apatow.
It's Judd Apatow. What's it called?
Pandemic it's coming out today. Yeah. I think it's out tonight in Australian time. They normally come out like 5 p.m. our time, don't they?
Yeah, so by the time this is out, it will have been out for a few days anyway. So, we sound like amateurs now because we're coming out later and it's already out. So it's all good. Let's move on. We have socials. We've got Twitter, we've got Facebook and Instagram. Give us a follow if you can. Question I wanted to ask is, does this interest you in wanting to see the Dolemite film?
Yeah, it does. And it does. I'll be honest, it does. I had a look to see if it was on any streaming services after I watched it. It's not, but I'd watch it. I
did exactly the same thing because I was like, I'd sit down and give it a watch just to see these scenes that we've seen created in a film.
I think even if you don't see them, like, if you don't see them, at least you'll even know that, like, it's just like a real piss take of a film that could be pretty fun.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Well, it's always a pleasure chatting, but we will be back next week with another film from 2019. It's a crime drama mystery called Rattlesnake, directed by Zach Hilditch. It stars Carmen Eljogo, Theo Rossi, and Emma Greenwell. I think there are 2 films called Rattlesnake on Netflix from 2019. Ooh. So make sure it's
God.
So make sure it's the right one when we watch next week.
I have to assume the other one's not an original.
think it still comes up as an original, but I think it's an international film. So just from a quick scroll when I was looking up the title. So just keep an eye on it.
So I'm watching the movie that should be in English. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm pretty sure it should be in English, and I think it's got a red poster with a black rattlesnake on it. So
Okay.
watch that one.
God, could you imagine if we start podcasting next week and you do your fast flicks and I do mine, and we're like, hang on.
It would be a disaster. We'll stay in touch this week to make sure we're on track.
Yeah. I'll watch the first scene and be like, is this what happened?
Good. Thank you. This was a good chat. I enjoyed this one, so thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you as well. I'm looking forward to chatting again next week.
Sweet. We'll see you then.
See you then.